My name is Jolina. I am one of our senior animal care specialists here at OdySea Aquarium, and today I'm going to be telling you about our American paddlefish. So here at OdySea, our American paddlefish reside in our Rivers of the World gallery. In the wild, these guys, as their name implies, are U.S. natives. These animals can be found in the Mississippi and Missouri River, so from Montana over to Illinois and down to the Gulf of Mexico. They do tend to hang out in the deepest parts of those rivers, in areas that tend to be very murky with poor water clarity. So some of the most interesting biological aspects of these animals are the feeding mechanism that they use. These animals are filter feeders, which means that they feed in a way similar to whales. They have a very large mouth. The jaw bones are not connected to the cranium bones. They open that massive mouth of theirs and just kind of cruise through the water column, passively collecting all the small microorganisms which they eat. So whales use baleen in order to filter feed. Our paddlefish use their gills. All fish have gills. It's what they use to breathe, sort of. It's what they use to extract oxygen from their environment, from the water, much in the same way that we use our lungs to extract oxygen from the air. But the paddlefish, unlike other fish, also use those gills to filter out their food. The gills are feathery filaments called rakers, and they act kind of like a coffee filter or a fish net to catch all those small particles of food. So in the wild, American paddlefish, whenever they're young, will be eating things like rotifers and copepods, freshwater plankton, zooplankton. Here at OdySea, we feed them a variety of invertebrate proteins, including 2 different types of krill and bloodworms, which is a type of insect larva. And you can come to OdySea and see these animals get fed twice a day, every day, and included with that is a little bit of an educational spiel. So the other interesting physiological aspect of these animals is their namesake, that paddle, or rostrum. A rostrum is basically a nose-like appendage, and the paddlefish don't use it to smell, but they do use it to find their food. For many years, scientists thought that they used it as a shovel to scoop up debris and animals hiding in the substrate, which they would then feed on, but it turns out that is not accurate. They actually use the paddle as an electrosensory device. So it acts as an antenna to pick up on electrical current. So all living organisms put off a little bit of electricity, ourselves included, and the paddlefish are able to pick up on the electricity coming off of something as small as an insect larva. Our group of paddlefish are still juveniles. They're probably between 4 and 6 years of age, and as they grow, they will take larger food items, but they don't really have any teeth to speak of. So everything that they eat does have to be small enough for them to swallow whole. So as I said, our group are juveniles. They're relatively small, under 3 feet. By the time they reach adult size, which will be between 12 and 15 years from now, they can reach lengths up to 6 feet. So they do have quite a bit of growing to do. Now I mentioned that these animals hang out in parts of the river where there's very poor water clarity. And if you look closely at the animals, you can see they do in fact have eyes. They're very small. They have very reduced eyes, and their eyesight is not very reliable. And that's why they evolved that electrical sense, so that they can find their prey items even in murky waters. Now they also use that electrical sense to aid in migrations in the wild. These animals have been known to migrate up to 2,000 miles within a river system, and they use that electrical sense also to sense one another, as well as other species that may predate on them while they're young. Once they reach sizes of 6 feet, there's not too much in their natural environment that's actually going to prey on them. So another interesting question I get about these animals is, what does a paddlefish taste like? That's not something that I can attest to, but they are a game species. They are fished in their native range. However, they are a protected species, so the bag limit is just 1. Now, they're not very coveted for their flesh, but they are known to have a caviar. And in the 1980s, whenever there was a trade embargo placed on Russian caviar, Americans turned to the paddlefish for our caviar needs. Unfortunately, this did have an effect on population sizes. However, we came up with the idea to raise these animals in a hatchery environment, grow them up until they're about the size of ours, about 2 or 3 feet, and then release half of those animals back into the wild, thus bolstering the population. So they're doing better in the wild, populations are increasing, but it's certainly still a concern. The primary concerns towards this animal's population sizes are damming of their natural habitats. So like I mentioned, they can migrate quite a large distance before they spawn on gravel and sandbars. If there's dams in their way, they may not be able to make it to their spawning ground and may not reproduce. And then the other aspect to their population concerns is, of course, habitat infringement. Siltation of the rivers, the introduction of non-native species for recreational activities. So both of those are probably things that we can manage to help in the near future. So I am going to feed these animals. We do feed these animals twice a day, as I mentioned. Today these guys are going to be getting some krill. So we offer them two different types of krill. This is Superba krill. We have chopped it up extra fine for these animals. Like I mentioned, they do have to be able to swallow whole anything that they eat, so we make it nice and easy for them. We also chop it up small so that it stays in the water column longer, so it floats longer. Once the food hits the bottom, the paddlefish cannot scoop it up, so we like to increase the amount of time that the food is floating so that everybody can get their fill. So as I feed these guys, you'll see the whole group start to slowly open those massive mouths of theirs and just kind of scoop through the water column. So I did say that the electrical sense is the main way that they find their food items in the wild. Here at OdySea, we're not feeding them live food, so they're relying mostly on olfaction, or their sense of smell. And they do have a fairly strong sense of smell, like most